Hi, this is Kevin, and welcome back. This is part two of the tutorial for the link pages coding assignment in the Easy University tutorial project. And in part one, we did a couple of things, but one of the things that we did is we populated the links in our base HTML page. And so at this point, when we start part two, all of the nav links should be working. So we have an instructor list, a section list, course list, semester list, student list, and registration list. Okay, so if you're not caught up to there, you need to go back to part one. So what are we going to do in part two? Well, in part two, we are going to populate the links that are in the list pages, instructor lists, section lists, etc. Because, for instance, right now we're on the registration list, and if I click on the link for these individual registrations, they're still dead, okay? Because I've yet to populate the href attributes for them. So let's go do that, okay? Close the browser for now. And let's look at instructorlist.html. And let's get a little size here. Okay, so as you can see, the href is empty. Okay, and it's going to be a little more complicated than the code that we used to navigate to each of the list pages themselves. And that's because we're going to need to pass a key in for the instructor that we want to have a link for. And of course, we didn't have to do that to create a link to the list page. Now, there's a couple of things that we could do here. One is that we could just put all the code that we need right in here to do the job, okay? And it turns out we're not going to do that because we may want to point to instructors from more than one place in our code. And if we do that, we're going to have too much duplicate code. So we want the minimum amount of code here. So how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to call a method. Okay, so let's look at the code for here first. Okay. And I'm just going to pick it out of my already completed version and paste it in here. Okay, so we're iterating over a list of instructors. And so what we want to do is we want to call some method of instructor that's going to return the proper URL string. Okay? And the classic name for this is get absolute URL. Okay? So that way, the only duplicate code that we're going to have are just these invocations of get absolute URL. That's about as thin as we're going to be able to make it. Okay, we've minimized the duplicate code, given that we're expecting to have links to the detail page from more than one spot. Okay, great. Okay, so then let's go to models.py, that's where we're going to put this, and let's find instructor, okay, and make the code a little bit bigger here so you can see it. And as you can see, we don't have a method called get absolute URL. So I'm going to copy it in from my already coded version, my already baked version, as I say. And it's a pretty easy bit of code, but we don't want to duplicate it all over the place. Okay? Because if we change the way we're doing this, we only want to change it in one spot. Okay, now this uses the reverse function. So let's do this. Let's highlight this and do alt return. And okay, we don't want audio OP reverse, so I guess we want Django URLs reverse, and yes, that's what we want. So we've added an import for that. At least I thought we had. No, we haven't. I don't know how that didn't work. So let's copy that. So this is in a package called Django.urls, and we're importing reverse. All right, so that should fix the problem I had in Instructor. Okay, so what are we going to do? Well, we're just going to call reverse. Well, what do we mean reverse? Okay, well, so far, when we were using the URL patterns, we were using them in a forward sense. We're using them to route requests that come in with that particular URL pattern, route them to the proper view. Okay. Now, what we want to do is we want to use that same URL pattern code, and we want to call it in another context. In the context where it's going to build the URL string. And this is one of the really nice things about the Django architecture for the URL patterns. We use them in both directions. So all the assumptions about what the URL string will be for a particular view and page are in one spot. They're in the URL pattern, which is really nice. So we call reverse, and we name the URL pattern. And then we have a quargs parameter. And we say that we're expecting to populate a key that we call PK, short for primary key. And how we're going to populate it? Well, we're going to populate it with the PK of itself. Now, I just want to point out, and I think I did this before, we were using this PK as though it were one of the fields on the model. And the fact it's not. It's an alias for the primary key. Okay, so this is an alias for one of the fields on the model, in this case, instructor ID. I've taken this approach of using PK as the name of the field that's coming in from the request when we're inbound, and this using PK as the name of the field we're going to populate it with, because there's a lot of potential Django magic that we can harness when we get to the next kind of view that we're going to do. Okay, and I unfortunately, the first time I did this project, I used parameter names that were more descriptive, and then in order to use the Django magic later, when we went on to the last kind of views that we're going to use, I had to go back and change a bunch of things. So that was very disappointing. So we're anticipating the magic. This maybe is not super descriptive code, but it does the job, and it's a way to harness the Django magic. Okay, so that's it. That's all that has to be done. Pretty straightforward there. So let's test this. So we ought to be able to go to the instructor list page, instructors, and let's click on my good friend Dan Hall. And here's his instructor detail page. Good. And then let's go down to me, Kevin Trainer. There's my instructor detail page. So pretty good. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to clone this kind of solution for all of the other lists. And I'm going to do the first one with you, and then I'll have you do the rest of these on your own. Okay, so let's take a look. So let's go back to the instructor list.html. Okay, let's copy this code that we're using to generate the URL. Okay. So the next one we're going to do is sections. So let's find section list. Okay. Section list. Very good. And let's see where we are. Let's paste the code that we use for instructor into section list. Okay, well, get absolute URL this is the method name that we're going to use on all the model classes, so that's fine. But of course, the variable that we're getting this out of isn't going to be instructor. We're in a loop where we're using section. So we're just going to change that to section, and that's going to be fine. Okay. And now, of course, we're going to have to add that method to the section model class. So let's do that. So we have this code for the instructor model class. So why don't we clone that? We're going to copy that. Okay, copy. And we're going to go up, and no, sections at the end, I think. Yeah, there it is. So we're going to put this right after the string method. And let's paste that in. Okay. And let's see if it says the same stuff. Well, the name of the method is fine. That's the standard. That's not going to change from model class to model class. The names of the keys are going to be fine too, because we're using this PK alias, and it will work for all of the model classes. The only thing we need to change here is instead of the URL pattern for instructor detail, we want the URL pattern for section detail. That's the only change that we need to make the clone actually work. All right. Okay, so let's go give that a test. All right. So we're already on the section list, and why is that? Well, because that's where we're forwarding the root URL. Okay. So we don't have to go hunting for the section list page, but let's click on the section links and make sure that they're live. So the first one's live. That looks good. And the next, let's do the last one too. The last one's properly live. That looks good too. All right, that's good. So we've done together, we've done instructors and sections. And what I need you to do on your own is courses, semesters, students, registrations. And again, I want you to go to the list page and find where we're generating the links for the to the detail pages, and clone the code that we have for the two lists we've already done, and create the code that's going to work for courses, semesters, students, and registrations. And when you get that done, I'll see you in part 3. See you there.